Welcome to my fifth tutorial on the Sony a7 III. Regarding storage capacity, redundancy and speed, Sony caught up with professional camera bodies from Canon, Nikon and other brands already when launching the A9 with a second memory card slot that supports UHS-II. This was a feature professional photographers wanted to have, especially for the storage redundancy, as they're always afraid of memory card corruption issues. Following the A9, also the a7R III and now the a7 III got it. However, there's more to it than just the increased storage capacity, redundancy and speed. You can define what media, still images or movies, and what file formats you want to save to which memory card. You can prioritize a slot, and you can also tell the camera to automatically switch to the next memory card when the capacity of the first one runs out. Since addressing the two memory card slots via the menu is not exactly intuitive, I want to show it to you in this video. Furthermore, I want to give you some food for thought on whether you really need the new, pretty expensive SDXC UHS-II memory cards with close to 300 megabytes per second write speed. The two memory card slots are not identical. Slot 1, which is the bottom one, supports SDXC cards of type UHS-I and the faster UHS-II. Slot 2, which is the upper one, only supports the slower SDXC UHS-I cards and the Sony's proprietary Memory Stick Pro Duo cards. Consequently, you want to make sure that you have the fast UHS-II card in slot 1 if you shoot in burst mode with 10 frames per second. The recording media settings feature on page 6 of the setup menu item lets you specify how the camera utilizes the two memory card slots. To do so, the recording media settings feature offers three submenus: prioritize recording media, recording mode, and auto switch media. We start with the second one, recording mode. Here you can determine whether you want to store still images on one card and movies on the other, RAWs on one card and JPEGs on the other, still images simultaneously on both cards, movies simultaneously on both cards, or both still images and movies simultaneously on both cards. To be more precise, the options are as follows. Standard. This just works like any other camera with only one memory card slot. The active slot is determined by the prioritize recording media submenu, to which I will come in a minute. Simultaneous in brackets stills. With this option enabled, two copies of each image are recorded simultaneously, one on each memory card. Simultaneous in brackets movies. This is the same as with the previous option, just with movies. Simultaneous in brackets stills / movies. This is the same as with the two previous options, just with stills and movies simultaneously. Sort in brackets RAW / JPEG. With this option enabled, RAWs get stored to the memory card and slot determined in prioritize recording media, and JPEGs into the other card and slot respectively. Sort in brackets JPEG / RAW. This is just the opposite as with previous option. Sort in brackets stills / movies. With this option enabled, stills get stored to the memory card and slot determined in prioritize recording media and movies into the other card and slot respectively. If you choose one of the three sort options, RAW / JPEG, JPEG / RAW, or still image / movie, it's important to know that the order in which they occur equals the order in which the camera stores them on the cards in slot 1 and 2. For example, if you choose the sort option, still image / movie, the camera automatically stores the still images on the memory card in slot 1 and the movies on the memory card in slot 2. But what if you want to store the movies on the memory card in slot 1? Here comes submenu 1 into play. Via prioritize recording media, you can change the order by which the camera stores the media on the memory cards in the two slots. In this case, you would prioritize slot 2 to get the movie stored on the memory card in slot 1. This is not exactly intuitive, which is the main reason why I'm doing this tutorial. The good news is that the order in which the camera finally stores the media on the memory cards in the two slots is shown on the bottom of the window of the recording media settings feature. This way you can ensure your settings are as intended. What happens if you want to shoot in burst mode and have chosen one of the two still image sort options while using two cards of two different speeds in the slots? The slowest one determines how fast the buffer of the camera empties. Consequently, you want to store the bigger RAW files on the fast card and smaller JPEGs on the other. And what happens when the storage capacity of one of the two memory cards runs out or one card goes missing? Here comes the third submenu of the recording media settings feature into play. With auto switch media set to on, the camera will still store media to whatever memory card is left. To conclude this chapter, some useful tips for using the recording media settings feature. When you enable simultaneous recording for stills, movies will be stored to the memory card specified by prioritized recording media. Accordingly, when you enable simultaneous recording for movies, still will be stored to the memory card specified by prioritized recording media. When you record movies on two memory cards simultaneously, the file system must be the same on both. X-Factory, this is usually XFAT for SDXC cards. By the way, I would recommend formatting memory cards in the camera instead of your computer. Finally, I promised I want to quickly elaborate on memory cards and how you can save money on them. I have seen several videos on YouTube where people recommended buying the currently fastest SDXC UHS-II memory cards and sold this to people as a necessity to benefit from the A7III's outstanding performance. They suggested these fast cards are necessary for burst mode as well as for XAVC S4K videos with a bitrate of 100 megabits per second. Since the respective Sony SDXC cards happen to be among the fastest, if not the fastest memory cards currently on the market, they recommend purchasing them. However, the Sony 128GB SDXC UHS-II card with a read speed of 300 megabytes per second and a write speed of 299 megabytes per second currently costs some $220 in the US and some 250 euros in Europe. Is this really necessary? It depends. If you are a sports photographer and happen to frequently shoot in burst mode, then these fast but expensive cards might be appropriate. But even then it depends. With the A7III, the size of an uncompressed RAW file is somewhat more than 48 megabytes and about 24 megabytes for a compressed RAW file. The high plus burst mode delivers 10 frames per second even when shooting uncompressed RAWs, but color depth drops from 14-bit to 12-bit, and you give up on live view. For some reason, the uncompressed 12-bit RAWs have the same file size as the uncompressed 14-bit RAWs, i.e. somewhat more than 48 megabytes. With 10 frames per second in high plus burst mode and 48 megabytes per frame, you send 480 megabytes per second to the buffer, which is clearly more than what even the fastest Sony memory cards can handle. In other words, as soon as the buffer is full and tries to empty itself, the memory card will be the bottleneck and you have to wait until the data have been written from the buffer to the memory card before you can do the next burst. However, according to Sony, the A7III's buffer is good for 40 uncompressed RAWs and 89 compressed RAWs. Consequently, the A7III's buffer size should be some 2 GB and you can shoot in high plus burst mode for about 4 seconds when shooting uncompressed RAWs and almost 9 seconds when shooting compressed RAWs. Personally, I have never shot bursts of more than 2 seconds or 20 frames altogether. And I was never in a situation where I had to shoot multiple bursts in a row. Hence, waiting for the buffer to clear wouldn't be an issue for me. Consequently, I don't need these very fast and very expensive SDXC UHS-II cards. The slower, much cheaper SDXC UHS-I cards with write speeds of 95 megabytes per second are absolutely sufficient for me. And here, I rely on the Sony cards. However, if you are a sports photographer who has to shoot multiple bursts in a row, you absolutely need these very fast memory cards from Sony with a write speed of close to 300 megabytes per second. Otherwise, you run the risk of being slowed down in your creative process by the memory card. When it comes to XAVC S4K videos with a maximum bitrate of 100 megabits per second these A7III offers, you absolutely don't need one of these fast memory cards. Just do the math. In the submenu Record Setting on page 1 of the Camera Settings 2 menu item, you have various options with what frame rate and bit rate you want to record your videos. The options for record setting depend on what video format you have chosen in the file format submenu before. If XAVC S4K was chosen, you can choose frame rates of 24 or 30 frames per second with a bitrate of up to 100M, which is how Sony abbreviates Mbps in this submenu. And Mbps is the abbreviation for megabits per second. Since 8 bits or 1 byte, the maximum bitrate of 100M or 100 megabits per second equals 12.5 megabyte per second. The maximum bit rates of memory cards are provided in MB/S. MB/S with a big or capital letter B is the abbreviation for megabytes per second. Consequently, even the bit rates of the slower and much cheaper SDXC UHS-I memory cards, typically 95 megabytes per second, surpass by far the 12.5 megabytes per second that are needed for shooting XAVC S4K videos with the maximum bitrate of 100M or 100 megabits per second respectively. To summarize this chapter, if you are not happen to be someone who shoots multiple bursts in a row, the cheaper SDXC UHS-I memory cards are absolutely sufficient for photography and even XAVC S4K videos at the highest bitrate. And the money you have just saved on memory cards, you better invest in a good various ND filter if you seriously want to shoot videos. If shedding some light onto this somewhat unintuitive part of the A7III's menu was helpful for you and could save you some money on memory cards, I'd be glad to get your thumbs up. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and bell icon next to it to make sure you will be notified of my next video.